You know what hurts the most? It's not being called names or being yelled at. It's being treated like you're invisible, like you don't matter, like your presence is just tolerated. I'm Margaret, 72 years old, and I've been feeling this weight for months now. My family sees me as just the old lady, the one who shows up to events, sits quietly in the corner, and apparently contributes nothing meaningful to anyone's life. I live in a cozy ranch house in suburban Columbus, Ohio, where the autumn leaves are just starting to turn that brilliant golden color that makes tourists drive through our neighborhood just to take pictures. My house sits on Maple Street. How perfectly American is that? With its white picket fence that my late husband Robert painted every spring for 37 years. Now I paint it myself, much to my neighbor Mrs. Henderson's horror. "Margaret, you shouldn't be up on that ladder at your age," she always says, as if 72 means I've suddenly become helpless. Every morning, I make my coffee in the same blue ceramic mug I've had for 20 years, the one with the tiny chip on the handle that Robert always said gave it character. I sit at my kitchen table, looking out at the bird feeder he installed, watching cardinals and blue jays fight over the sunflower seeds. The morning routine is sacred to me. Coffee, toast with strawberry jam from the farmer's market, and the Columbus Dispatch spread across the table. I read every section, including the obituaries, because at my age, you never know when you'll recognize a name. I used to be the one everyone came to for advice, the one who organized family gatherings, the one who remembered every birthday, anniversary, and graduation. I was the keeper of family recipes, the one who knew which cousin was allergic to what, who was going through a divorce, who needed a little extra support. My kitchen was command central for holidays. Thanksgiving prep started in October. Christmas cookies were baked in assembly line fashion every December, and Easter meant coordinating egg hunts for a dozen grandchildren and great-nieces and nephews. But somewhere along the way, I became invisible. Maybe it started when Robert died 3 years ago. Maybe it was when I stopped hosting the big family dinners because cooking for 30 people became too much for one person. Maybe it was simply the natural progression of aging in a youth-obsessed culture. Whatever the reason, I went from being the family matriarch to being, well, just the old lady. My niece Sarah is having her first baby, and the whole family is buzzing with excitement. Don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled for her. Sarah has always been special to me, the daughter I never had. I remember teaching her to bake chocolate chip cookies when she was 8, her little hands barely able to hold the mixing spoon. I remember her high school graduation, how proud I was when she got into Ohio State. I remember her wedding 2 years ago, how beautiful she looked in her grandmother's pearls. My mother's pearls, actually, which I'd given her as a wedding gift. But watching how they plan around me now, like I'm some fragile decoration they have to accommodate, stings more than I care to admit. The phone calls that stop when I enter the room, the way they speak louder and slower as if I've lost my mind along with my youth, the way they make decisions about family events and then inform me afterward as if my opinion doesn't matter anymore. Tomorrow is Sarah's baby shower, and I can already feel the familiar knot forming in my stomach. I know exactly how it will go. I'll arrive with my carefully chosen gifts, sit where they place me, smile when expected, and leave feeling smaller than when I arrived. The venue is Sarah's new house in Dublin, one of those modern subdivisions where every house looks like it came from the same catalog. All granite countertops and open floor plans, so different from the cozy homes where we used to gather. I've spent weeks preparing for this shower. The gifts I've chosen aren't just presents. They're pieces of my heart, my history, my hopes for this new little person who will carry our family forward. But something tells me tomorrow might be different. Something tells me I'm about to discover just how little my family thinks of me. And honestly, I'm not sure I'm ready for that revelation. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into Sarah's beautifully decorated living room. The October air was crisp, that perfect Ohio autumn weather when you need a light sweater, but the sun still warms your face. Sarah's house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, those Bath and Body Works candles that seem to be in every young woman's home these days. Pink and gold balloons bobbed from every surface, and a Welcome Baby Emma banner stretched across the stone fireplace mantel. The house was one of those open-concept designs that are so popular now, all flowing spaces and sight lines, nothing like the compartmentalized homes of my generation, where each room had a purpose and privacy. The kitchen island was massive, covered in pink tablecloths and decorated with tiny baby shoes and pacifiers. Everything was Instagram perfect, the kind of setup that would generate dozens of photos for social media. Everyone was already there. My sister Linda, looking elegant in her new haircut and designer sweater. My other nieces Jessica and Amanda, both in their 30s and successful in their own right. Sarah's college friends with their perfect makeup and coordinated outfits, her work colleagues from the marketing firm where she's made quite a name for herself. The chatter was animated, full of laughter and excitement, that particular energy that comes when women gather to celebrate new life. I handed Sarah my gifts, 3 carefully wrapped boxes that had taken me weeks to choose and prepare. The wrapping paper was cream-colored with tiny gold stars, elegant and timeless, not the cartoon characters or bright colors that seemed to dominate the other gifts. Sarah accepted them with a distracted smile, already looking past me to greet someone else who had just arrived. "Just put them over there with the others, Aunt Margaret," she said, gesturing toward a corner table that was already overflowing with presents. I made my way to where the drinks were set up on the kitchen island, past clusters of women discussing everything from nursery themes to the best pediatricians in Columbus. The conversation was lively, full of shared experiences about pregnancy, childbirth, and child-rearing. I had nothing to contribute to these discussions. I'd never had children of my own, something that had been a source of quiet pain for decades. That's when I saw it. The cups were arranged in neat rows on the granite countertop, each one a clear plastic tumbler with a cute vinyl decal. They were obviously custom-made, probably ordered online from one of those personalization websites. Each cup was labeled with a nickname or relationship to the baby. Mommy-to-be in elegant script, Grandma Linda with little hearts, Auntie Jessica with flowers, best friend Katie, surrounded by stars. And then, at the very end, almost hidden behind the others like an afterthought, was mine. Just the old lady. The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the plastic suddenly feeling cheap and flimsy in my fingers. The black vinyl lettering was perfectly applied, just like all the others. This wasn't a mistake or a last-minute addition. Someone had thought about this. Someone had sat down, probably at their computer, and decided that while everyone else got loving titles that connected them to baby Emma, I was just the old lady. Not Great Aunt Margaret. Not even Aunt Margaret, not Robert's widow, or the family historian, or any of the dozen other ways I could have been identified. Just the old lady, as if my entire identity, my 72 years of life, my relationships, my contributions to this family could be reduced to those 4 dismissive words. I filled my cup with pink punch, some sweet concoction that tasted like artificial strawberry, and tried to swallow past the lump in my throat. Around me, the party continued in full swing, but I felt like I was watching it through thick glass. Every laugh seemed to mock me. Every loving glance between family members highlighted my isolation. The conversations flowed around me like water around a stone, never quite including me, but not exactly excluding me either. I found a chair in the corner, because that's where old ladies sit, apparently, a wingback chair that had been positioned to give a good view of the festivities while keeping me out of the main action. From there, I watched my family celebrate without really including me. Linda was holding court near the gift table, regaling everyone with stories about her own grandchildren. Jessica and Amanda were comparing notes about their careers and travel plans. Sarah's friends were taking endless selfies and posting them in real time to their social media accounts. The worst part? Nobody seemed to notice the cup, or if they did, they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. To them, I really was just the old lady, a fixture at family events, expected to be grateful for being included at all, not someone whose feelings might be hurt by such casual cruelty. I sat there, clutching my insulting cup, and realized that this was my family's true opinion of me. After all these years, all the love I'd given, all the support I'd provided, all the memories we'd shared, I had been reduced to a stereotype, a burden, an obligation. What would you do in my place? Would you speak up and cause a scene, or would you swallow the hurt like I did? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, because this story is just getting started, and you won't believe what happened when those gifts were opened. The rest of the baby shower felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distorted. Conversations flowed around me in waves, but I couldn't quite grasp them. The laughter seemed too loud, too bright, like someone had turned up the volume on everything except my own voice. I smiled when someone looked my way, nodded at appropriate moments, and clutched that horrible cup like it was evidence in a trial where I was both the victim and the accused. The games had started, those silly baby shower activities that seemed designed to make everyone feel included while actually highlighting who belongs and who doesn't. There was a game where you had to guess the baby food flavors by taste, another where you estimated the size of Sarah's belly with yarn, and one where everyone had to share their best parenting advice. When it came to me, the room went awkwardly quiet. What advice could the old lady possibly have about raising children? Just love them, I said simply, and everyone nodded politely before moving on to the next person who had actual experience with diapers and sleepless nights. I kept thinking about the gifts I'd brought, sitting ignored in their corner like unwanted guests at a party. 3 boxes, each chosen with such care, each representing months of thought and preparation. The antique rocking chair I'd found at an estate sale in Granville, a beautiful piece from the 1940s, with intricate carved details and a gentle, soothing motion. I'd had it professionally restored, the wood refinished to a warm honey color, the cushions reupholstered in soft cream fabric that would complement any nursery. That chair had a story. It had belonged to a woman named Eleanor who had rocked 5 children and 12 grandchildren in it. When I saw it at the estate sale, surrounded by the detritus of a life well lived, I knew it needed to continue its purpose. I spent $300 I couldn't really afford to have it restored, but I wanted Emma to have something with history, something that connected her to the generations of mothers who had come before. The second gift was even more personal. A hand-knitted baby blanket I'd spent 2 months making, working on it every evening while watching my old movies. The pattern was intricate, a combination of cables and lace that I'd learned from my own grandmother 60 years ago. The yarn was the softest merino wool I could find, in a delicate cream color that would work for any gender. Every stitch was a prayer for this baby I'd never even met yet, every row a meditation on the love I wanted to wrap around her. I'd knitted blankets for all the babies in our family over the years, but this one was special. Maybe because I sensed it might be my last, or maybe because I'd put extra care into making it perfect. The pattern told a story, cables that looked like twisted ropes, representing the bonds of family, lace sections that resembled flowers, symbolizing growth and beauty, a border that reminded me of Celtic knots, endless and unbreaking. The third gift was the most significant. A check for $5,000, money I'd saved from Robert's pension and my own careful budgeting. It was earmarked for Emma's college fund, a head start on her education that would compound over 18 years into something substantial. I'd done the math, calculated the interest, imagined this little girl walking across a graduation stage someday with the help of her great-aunt's foresight. But sitting there, being just the old lady, I wondered if any of it mattered. Would they even notice who the gifts were from? Would they assume someone else had been generous, someone more important, someone whose opinion actually counted? I could already picture the thank you notes, generic, polite, the kind you send to distant relatives out of obligation rather than genuine gratitude. I watched Sarah open gift after gift, each one accompanied by squeals of delight and photos for social media. Tiny clothes in pastel colors, bottles and sippy cups, toys that played music and flashed lights, books with bright illustrations and simple rhymes. All lovely, all thoughtful, all from people who had proper titles on their cups, people who mattered in ways I apparently didn't. The pile of opened gifts grew larger, creating a small mountain of baby paraphernalia that would probably overwhelm any new parent. Diapers and wipes, blankets and burp cloths, monitors and thermometers, everything a modern baby could possibly need, and then some. Each gift was met with enthusiasm, and the giver was thanked by name, often with a little story about why they'd chosen that particular item, or how they'd used something similar with their own children. Linda was particularly vocal, offering commentary on each gift and sharing unsolicited advice about everything from feeding schedules to sleep training. She hadn't spoken to me beyond a polite hello when I arrived, but she was certainly making her presence known to everyone else. Even she seemed to have forgotten I existed, despite the fact that we'd grown up in the same house, shared the same parents, weathered the same family storms. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to say anything about the cup. I wasn't going to cause a scene or demand an apology or make anyone feel uncomfortable. I was going to let my gifts speak for themselves, let my actions demonstrate my worth in a way that words never could. Because sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is the one you don't have to voice out loud. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply being yourself, fully and completely, and letting others discover their own shortcomings through contrast. I just had to wait for the right moment, and something told me it was coming soon. The gift opening ceremony was finally beginning, and I felt my heart rate quicken in a way that reminded me I wasn't as young as I used to be. Sarah had positioned herself in the center of the living room, surrounded by her court of admirers, while someone, her friend Katie, I think, designated herself the official photographer. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting everything in that golden October light that makes moments feel more significant than they actually are. The setup was elaborate, clearly planned with social media in mind. Sarah sat in a plush armchair that had been draped with a pink satin sash reading, "Mommy to be," while the gifts were arranged in a semicircle around her like offerings to a queen. Someone had even set up a small easel with a chalkboard sign that read, "Baby Emma's shower," in elegant script, complete with the date and little drawn hearts. "Let's start with the big boxes," Sarah announced, reaching for a large gift bag decorated with silver tissue paper and curly ribbons. I recognized it immediately. It was from her college roommate Jennifer, something expensive-looking from Pottery Barn Kids, based on the distinctive packaging. The room oohed and awed appropriately as she pulled out a designer diaper bag in soft gray leather with rose gold hardware. "Oh my God, Jen, this is gorgeous!" Sarah exclaimed, holding it up for everyone to see and admire. "I've been wanting this exact one but couldn't justify the price." More photos were taken, more compliments exchanged, more social media posts crafted in real time. One by one, the gifts were opened and admired with the kind of performative enthusiasm that modern celebrations seem to require. A high-tech baby monitor from Linda that could track breathing patterns and room temperature. Designer clothes from various cousins. Tiny outfits that cost more than I used to spend on my own wardrobe. Books from friends. The kind of board books with interactive elements that didn't exist when I was young. A baby carrier that looked more like a piece of NASA equipment than something for holding an infant. Each gift was met with squeals of delight, and the giver was thanked by name, often with a little story about why they'd chosen that particular item. I remember how much this helped when Tyler was teething, or this was a lifesaver during those first few months. The gift givers basked in the attention, sharing their own parenting experiences and offering advice that Sarah received with grateful nods and promises to remember everything. My 3 boxes remained untouched in their corner, looking increasingly lonely as the pile of opened gifts grew around Sarah's chair. I noticed a few people glancing in their direction, probably wondering whose gifts they were, but no one asked. It was as if they were invisible, just like me. I sipped from my "just the old lady" cup and watched the performance, feeling increasingly detached from the proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, literally labeled as insignificant, while my most meaningful contributions to this child's life sat ignored in the corner, like afterthoughts. But I wasn't bitter. Not exactly. I was determined. You see, I'd learned something important in my 72 years of life through decades of marriage, friendship, loss, and family dynamics. Sometimes people need to discover your worth on their own. Sometimes the most powerful lesson comes not from what you say, but from what you allow them to realize through their own experience. The pile of opened gifts was growing impressive, a small mountain of baby paraphernalia that would probably overwhelm any new parent. Bottles and pacifiers, clothes in every size from newborn to 12 months, toys that would stimulate development, and others that would simply entertain. It was a generous outpouring of love and support, the kind of abundance that modern American baby showers are known for. But I knew something the others didn't. I knew that in a few minutes, when Sarah finally reached my boxes, the energy in the room was going to shift dramatically. The casual chatter would quiet, the performative enthusiasm would give way to something more genuine, and everyone would be forced to confront their assumptions about the old lady in the corner. I had spent months preparing these gifts, not just choosing and purchasing them, but imbuing them with intention and love. The rocking chair represented continuity, the blanket represented comfort, and the check represented opportunity. Together, they told a story about what really mattered in life, not the flashy, expensive items that would be outgrown or forgotten, but the lasting gifts that would shape a child's future. I just had to be patient a little longer. After all, I'd been patient my whole life, waiting for my turn to speak, to be heard, to be valued. What was a few more minutes? The best gifts, I've learned, are always worth the wait. And mine were about to prove that being just the old lady doesn't mean being just anything at all. What would you do if your family treated you this way? Would you stay quiet like I did, or would you speak up immediately? Make sure you're subscribed because you won't want to miss what happens when my gifts finally get opened. It's going to change everything. The gift opening marathon was winding down, and I could see Sarah's energy flagging slightly, despite her best efforts to maintain enthusiasm. She'd been exclaiming over onesies and burp cloths for the better part of an hour, and even the most gracious person gets tired of performing gratitude for an audience. Her smile was still bright, but I could see the slight tightness around her eyes that suggested she was ready for this part of the celebration to end. The photographer, Katie, was still snapping pictures with the dedication of a war correspondent, but even she seemed to be running out of creative angles. The other guests were showing signs of restlessness too. Some were already cleaning up discarded wrapping paper and ribbon. Others were checking their phones or refilling their drinks. The initial excitement had settled into that comfortable post-celebration lull that signals the beginning of the end of any party. Linda was organizing the opened gifts into categories, her natural tendency toward control asserting itself even at someone else's event. "We should make a list of who gave what," she announced, pulling out her phone to start a notes app. "For the thank you cards, you know?" She was in her element, managing and directing, making sure everything was properly documented and acknowledged. Perfect timing, really. The room was quieter now, less chaotic, which meant that when my gifts were finally opened, they would have everyone's full attention. Sometimes the best moments come not during the peak excitement, but in the quiet spaces between, when people are more receptive to surprise and genuine emotion. "Just a few more," Sarah announced, looking around the room with the slightly desperate cheerfulness of someone trying to maintain momentum. That's when her eyes landed on my 3 boxes, still sitting where I'd placed them when I arrived, looking somehow both patient and reproachful in their corner. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Was it guilt, recognition, or just the realization that she'd somehow overlooked them in all the excitement? Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression that suggested she was remembering something important, something she'd forgotten in the whirlwind of the afternoon. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, I almost forgot yours," she said, and I noticed she didn't use the title from my cup. Interesting. There was something different in her voice, too, a note of, what? Embarrassment? Anticipation? It was hard to tell. I simply smiled and nodded, keeping my expression neutral and pleasant. "Take your time, dear. No rush at all." My voice was calm, steady, giving nothing away about the storm of emotions churning beneath the surface. The room had grown quieter now, that natural lull that comes when a group activity is winding down. Some people were already thinking about leaving, gathering their purses and checking the time. Others were settling in for what they assumed would be the final few minutes of gift opening, probably expecting more of the same. Cute baby clothes, practical items, the usual shower fare. Sarah reached for the smallest box first, the one containing my check. I watched her face carefully as she opened it, noting every micro-expression, every subtle shift in her demeanor. The box was elegantly wrapped in cream paper with a gold ribbon, understated but clearly expensive. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small envelope with her name written in my careful cursive handwriting. I saw her eyes widen as she opened the envelope and read the amount on the check. $5,000, written out in full in my neat script, with "For Emma's College Fund" written in the memo line. She looked up at me, then back at the check, then up at me again, as if she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. "Aunt Margaret, this is incredibly generous. I don't know what to say." Her voice was softer now, more genuine than it had been all afternoon. The performative quality was gone, replaced by something that sounded like real emotion. "It's for Emma's education," I said simply, my voice carrying across the now quiet room. Every child deserves a good start in life, and education is the one gift that can never be taken away. The room had gone completely quiet now. Linda was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Respect? Guilt? The other family members were looking between Sarah and me, suddenly paying attention to the old lady in the corner in a way they hadn't all afternoon. But we weren't done yet. Sarah was reaching for the second box, the hand-knitted blanket. This box was larger, wrapped in the same cream paper, but with a different ribbon, this one in soft pink. I'd spent extra time on the presentation, wanting everything to be perfect, wanting the unveiling to have maximum impact. As she lifted the lid and pushed aside the tissue paper, I heard her sharp intake of breath. The blanket was folded carefully, displaying the intricate pattern I'd worked so hard to perfect. She lifted it out of the box, unfolding it slowly, and I could see her beginning to understand the amount of work that had gone into creating it. "Did you make this yourself?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was holding the blanket up to show the room, and I could see people leaning forward to get a better look at the detailed stitching, the complex pattern, the obvious skill and time that had gone into its creation. "Every stitch," I confirmed, allowing a note of quiet pride to enter my voice. "It took me about 2 months, working on it every evening. The pattern is one my grandmother taught me when I was about your age." The third box, the rocking chair, was going to be the real revelation. I could see Sarah looking at it with new eyes now, probably wondering what other surprises awaited her. The box was large and heavy, clearly containing something substantial, something that had required significant thought and investment. The room was about to learn something important about assumptions, about value, and about the danger of dismissing people based on their age or perceived relevance. I took another sip from my insulting cup and waited for the moment when everything would change, when the old lady in the corner would reveal herself to be something far more significant than anyone had imagined. Sarah struggled with the weight of the third box, and for a moment I almost offered to help before remembering that I was just the old lady. Let her discover what was inside on her own. The anticipation in the room was palpable now. Everyone had witnessed the check and the blanket, and they were beginning to understand that perhaps they had misjudged the quiet woman in the corner. The box was substantial, wrapped in the same elegant cream paper, but requiring both hands to lift. Sarah set it on the floor in front of her chair and began carefully removing the wrapping, her movements more deliberate now, as if she sensed this gift deserved special attention. When she finally opened the box and pushed aside the protective padding, I heard several gasps around the room. The antique rocking chair, even disassembled for shipping, was clearly something extraordinary. The honey-colored wood gleamed in the afternoon light, and the intricate carved details were visible even in pieces. "Aunt Margaret, is this—" Sarah's voice trailed off as she lifted out one of the chair arms, running her fingers over the smooth finish and delicate craftsmanship. "It's a 1940s rocking chair," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "I found it at an estate sale in Granville. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor, who rocked 5 children and 12 grandchildren in it. I had it professionally restored, the wood refinished, new cushions made. It's ready to rock another generation." The room erupted in murmurs of amazement. Linda was staring at me with her mouth slightly open, clearly trying to calculate what such a restoration would have cost. The other women were crowding around to get a better look at the beautiful piece, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine admiration. "This must have cost a fortune to restore," Jessica said, her voice filled with something that might have been respect. "Some things are worth the investment," I replied simply, taking another sip from my just the old lady cup. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me. Here I was, drinking from a vessel that labeled me as insignificant, while revealing gifts that demonstrated just how wrong that assessment was. Sarah was still examining the chair pieces, her eyes bright with tears. "Aunt Margaret, I can't believe you did all this. The check, the blanket, this beautiful chair. It's too much." "Nothing is too much for family," I said, and I let my eyes sweep the room, taking in all the faces that were now looking at me with new understanding. "Emma is going to be very loved and very fortunate. She deserves the best start in life." The silence that followed was profound. I could see people doing mental calculations, adding up the value of my gifts, not just the monetary cost, but the time, thought, and love that had gone into each one. The $5,000 check, the hand-knitted blanket that represented months of work, the restored antique chair that would become a family heirloom. Linda was the first to break the silence. "Margaret, I had no idea you were planning something so generous." Her voice was small, almost ashamed, and I could see her glancing at the gift she'd brought. A nice baby monitor, certainly, but nothing that approached the thoughtfulness or significance of what I'd given. "Well," I said, standing up slowly and smoothing my skirt, "I suppose even old ladies can surprise people sometimes." I held up my cup, letting the label face the room. Though I have to say, this is quite the conversation starter. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every eye in the room focused on my cup, reading those 4 dismissive words, "just the old lady." The silence that followed was different from before. This was the silence of shame, of recognition, of people suddenly understanding how cruel they had been. Sarah's face went white. "Oh my God, Aunt Margaret, I'm so sorry. I wasn't the one who—" She was looking around the room desperately, trying to figure out who was responsible for the cups. "It doesn't matter who wrote it," I said gently. "What matters is that it reflects how I'm seen by this family. And perhaps after today, that might change." I could see the wheels turning in everyone's minds. Here was the woman they had dismissed as just the old lady, who had given more than anyone else, who had shown more love and thoughtfulness than all of them combined. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Katie, the photographer, had stopped taking pictures entirely. Amanda was staring at her hands. Jessica was looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Even Linda, usually so confident and controlling, seemed diminished by the revelation. "I think," I said, setting down my cup on the nearest table, "that I've made my point. Sarah, darling, I hope you and Emma will be very happy. The chair should be assembled by a professional. I have the contact information for the man who restored it. What would you do if you discovered you'd been so wrong about someone? Would you apologize immediately, or would pride get in the way? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, because the aftermath of this revelation is going to surprise you even more. The aftermath of my revelation was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. I could see the realization spreading across faces, the shame settling in, the uncomfortable shifting as people tried to process what had just happened. The woman they had dismissed as irrelevant had just demonstrated her true worth in the most undeniable way possible. Sarah was still holding pieces of the rocking chair, tears streaming down her face. "Aunt Margaret, please don't leave. I'm so sorry about the cup. I honestly don't know who made them, but it doesn't matter. There's no excuse for treating you that way." I paused at the edge of the living room, my purse already in hand. The afternoon light was starting to fade, casting longer shadows across the hardwood floors. The party decorations that had seemed so festive earlier now looked somehow hollow, like props in a play that had taken an unexpected turn. "The person who made the cups isn't important," I said, my voice calm but carrying clearly across the room. "What's important is that no one questioned it. No one thought there was anything wrong with reducing me to just the old lady. That tells me everything I need to know about how I'm valued in this family." Linda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Margaret, that's not fair. We all love you. You know that. Do you?" I asked, turning to face her directly. "Because love isn't just a feeling, Linda. It's action. It's consideration. It's remembering that someone has feelings and treating them with respect." I gestured toward the mountain of opened gifts. "When was the last time any of you asked about my life, my health, my interests? When was the last time someone invited me to something other than an obligation?" The silence was deafening. I could see people searching their memories, trying to remember the last time they had reached out to me for something other than a family event, where my presence was expected but not particularly wanted. "I spend my days alone in that house on Maple Street," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I read books. I tend my garden. I volunteer at the library twice a week. I have opinions about politics, about movies, about life. I have stories about your father, Linda, about growing up during the Cold War, about what it was like to be a young wife in the 1970s, but no one ever asks." Amanda, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. "Aunt Margaret, I didn't realize— I always thought you preferred to be quiet." "There's a difference between being quiet and being ignored," I replied. "I'm quiet because I've learned that my voice doesn't seem to matter much to this family. But that doesn't mean I don't have things to say." The room was thick with uncomfortable tension. I could see people glancing at each other, silently communicating their guilt and embarrassment. The celebration that had been so joyful an hour ago had transformed into something much more serious, a reckoning that none of them had expected. Sarah wiped her eyes and stood up, still clutching a piece of the rocking chair. "What can we do to make this right? How can we show you that you matter to us?" I considered her question carefully. This was the moment I had been building toward, the opportunity to either burn bridges or build them stronger. "You can start by seeing me as a person, not just a fixture at family events. You can remember that I have a name, a history, a life outside of these gatherings. You can stop talking about me like I'm not in the room." "We do that?" Jessica asked, her voice small. "All the time," I confirmed. "You discuss my health, my living situation, my capabilities, as if I'm not sitting right there. You make decisions about family events and inform me afterward. You speak louder and slower, as if age has made me stupid instead of just older." The truth was landing like physical blows. I could see it in their faces, the recognition of behaviors they had never consciously acknowledged. The casual ageism, the unconscious dismissal, the way they had gradually pushed me to the margins of family life. "I don't want your pity," I continued. "I don't want you to suddenly start including me in everything out of guilt. What I want is respect. What I want is to be valued for who I am, not tolerated because we share DNA." Linda was crying now, quiet tears that she wasn't bothering to wipe away. "Mom always said you were the strong one," she whispered. "Even when we were kids, she said Margaret was the one who would survive anything." "Your mother was right," I said softly. "I have survived a lot. I survived losing the love of my life. I survived being childless in a family that revolves around children. I survived being widowed and learning to live alone. And I'll survive being dismissed by my own family, if that's what it comes to." The weight of my words settled over the room like a blanket. These people, who had been so casual in their disregard, were finally understanding the impact of their actions. The old lady in the corner had a voice, and she was finally using it. "But I'd rather not have to," I added, allowing a note of hope to enter my voice. "I'd rather be part of this family in a real way, not just as an obligation you check off your list." The room was about to witness something that would change our family dynamics forever. But first, they had to decide if they were ready to do the work that real relationships require. What happened next surprised even me. Sarah set down the pieces of the rocking chair and walked directly to where I stood. Her face streaked with tears, but her expression determined. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around me in a hug that felt different from the polite embraces we usually exchanged at family gatherings. This was real, desperate, full of genuine emotion. "I'm so sorry, Aunt Margaret," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm sorry for the cup. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for not seeing how amazing you are." Her voice was muffled but clear, and I could feel her tears soaking through my blouse. For a moment I stood rigid, unsure how to respond. I had prepared for anger, for defensiveness, for excuses. I hadn't prepared for this raw, honest emotion. Slowly, I brought my arms up to return the embrace, feeling something tight in my chest begin to loosen. "I made the cups," came a small voice from across the room. We turned to see Katie, the photographer, her face flushed with shame. "I thought it would be funny. I don't really know you, and I just thought it was like a joke about being the older generation. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Here was the culprit, this young woman who barely knew me, who had reduced my entire identity to a thoughtless joke. But looking at her face, seeing her genuine distress, I felt my anger transforming into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "You're 25, maybe 26? I asked her gently. 27, she whispered. "When you're my age, you'll understand that words have power," I said. "That casual cruelty, even when it's meant as a joke, can cut deeper than you imagine. But you're young, and you can learn from this." Linda had moved closer during this exchange, and now she reached out tentatively to touch my arm. "Margaret, I need to apologize too. Not just for today, but for how I've treated you since Robert died. I think I was so focused on my own life, my own grandchildren, that I forgot you were grieving too. I forgot that you lost your partner, your best friend." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Linda and I had grown up sharing everything: clothes, secrets, dreams. But somewhere along the way, we had become strangers who happened to share the same parents. Her acknowledgement of my grief, of Robert's importance in my life, was something I hadn't realized I needed to hear. Robert was my world for 43 years, I said quietly. When he died, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my identity as half of a couple, my role as a hostess, my sense of purpose. And instead of reaching out, everyone seemed to step back, like widowhood was contagious. We didn't know how to help, Amanda said, her voice thick with emotion. We didn't know what to say. You didn't have to say anything special, I replied. You just had to remember I was still here, still part of this family, still someone worth knowing. The room had transformed completely. The baby shower decorations seemed almost absurd now, frivolous props in what had become a much more important drama. The gifts, the games, the celebration, all of it had been overshadowed by this moment of raw honesty and recognition. Jessica, who had been silent through most of the confrontation, finally spoke up. I want to know about Uncle Robert. I want to hear your stories. I was so young when he died, and I realize I never really knew him through your eyes. He would have loved that, I said, feeling tears prick my own eyes for the first time that afternoon. He was so proud of all of you. He used to say that watching you kids grow up was like watching flowers bloom and fast forward. The metaphor seemed to break something open in the room. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once, sharing memories, asking questions, apologizing for years of neglect and casual dismissal. The energy had completely shifted from the performative celebration of earlier to something much more real and meaningful. Sarah picked up my insulting cup from where I had set it down and walked to the kitchen. I watched as she opened the cabinet under the sink and dropped it directly into the trash can. The sound of plastic hitting the bottom was surprisingly satisfying. From now on, she announced, Aunt Margaret gets the best cup in the house, and not just at parties, anytime she wants to visit. I'd like that, I said simply. I'd like to visit more often. I'd like to be part of Emma's life in a real way, not just as the old lady who sends birthday cards. The afternoon sun was setting now, casting the room in golden light that made everything look softer, more forgiving. The crisis had passed, but the real work was just beginning. Relationships that had been damaged by years of neglect couldn't be repaired in a single afternoon. But this was a start. What would you do if your family finally saw you for who you really are? Would you forgive immediately, or would you make them work for it? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, because the final chapter of this story will show you how real change happens in families. 6 months later, I'm sitting in that beautiful rocking chair in Sarah's nursery, holding baby Emma for the first time. She's 3 weeks old, perfect and tiny, wrapped in the blanket I made for her. The chair rocks with the same gentle rhythm it has maintained for over 80 years, connecting me to all the mothers and grandmothers who came before. The room is painted in soft yellow with white trim, decorated with pictures that tell the story of our family, including several photos of Robert and me from our younger days that Sarah asked me to help her choose. On the bookshelf sits a small framed photo of the baby shower, but it's not one of the posed shots Katie took. It's a picture Sarah snapped on her phone during our emotional conversation, showing all of us with tears in our eyes and real expressions on our faces. Tell me about the blanket pattern again, Sarah says from where she's sitting on the floor, organizing baby clothes. She's been asking me to repeat stories lately, not because she forgets, but because she's finally listening in a way she never did before. The cables represent the bonds of family, I explain, running my finger along the intricate stitching. They're twisted together, strong and unbreakable. The lace sections are like flowers. They represent growth and beauty and the potential for new life. And the border is like a Celtic knot, endless and eternal. Emma makes a small sound in her sleep, and I adjust her position slightly. She's so light, so fragile, but I can already see strength in her tiny features. She has Sarah's nose and her father's chin, but her eyes, when they're open, remind me of Robert's, clear and intelligent and full of curiosity about the world. The changes in our family haven't been dramatic or sudden. There was no magical transformation where everyone suddenly became perfect, but there have been small, meaningful shifts that have accumulated into something significant. Linda calls me twice a week now, not just to check on me, but to actually talk about books we're reading, about politics, about memories of our childhood. Jessica has started visiting on Sunday afternoons, bringing her children to hear stories about their great-uncle Robert and their family history. Amanda surprised me the most. She asked if I would teach her to knit, saying she wanted to learn the traditional skills that were being lost. We spend Thursday evenings together now, her hands clumsy with the needles while I guide her through basic stitches. She's working on a scarf for her husband, and while it's far from perfect, it's made with love and patience. The baby shower incident became a turning point, but not in the dramatic way you might expect. There were no grand gestures or elaborate apologies. Instead, there was the slow, steady work of rebuilding relationships that had been neglected for too long. It required effort from everyone, me included. I had to learn to speak up when I felt ignored, to ask for what I needed instead of suffering in silence. I had to accept that some of the distance in our relationships was my own doing, that I had retreated into myself after Robert's death and made it easy for others to overlook me. The college fund I started for Emma has grown to over $6,000 now, thanks to interest and additional contributions from other family members who were inspired by my initial gift. But more importantly, I've been documenting our family history for her, writing down stories, scanning old photographs, creating a legacy that goes beyond money. She's going to be so spoiled, Sarah says, looking up at us with a smile. Between your stories and Linda's cooking lessons and Jessica's art projects, she's going to think all great aunts are magical. All great aunts are magical, I reply. We just don't always get the chance to show it. The rocking chair creaks gently as I continue the soothing motion. Emma's breathing is steady and peaceful, and I find myself thinking about Eleanor, the woman who owned this chair before me. I wonder if she ever imagined that her chair would continue its purpose decades later, in a different house, with a different family, but carrying the same love and hope for the future. Aunt Margaret, Sarah says quietly, I want Emma to know that she comes from a family of strong women. Women who speak up for themselves, who don't let others define their worth, who give generously, but also demand respect. She'll learn that by watching you, I tell her, and by watching all of us. The best lessons aren't taught with words, they're demonstrated through actions. As the afternoon light fades and Emma continues to sleep peacefully in my arms, I think about the journey that brought us to this moment. It started with hurt and dismissal, with a cup that labeled me as insignificant. But it led to something beautiful, a family that finally sees each other clearly, that values wisdom along with youth, that understands that love requires both giving and receiving respect. The old lady in the corner found her voice, and in doing so, she helped her family find theirs too. Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with the smallest acts of courage, like refusing to accept being diminished, like insisting on your own worth, like believing that you deserve better than being just anything. Emma stirs in her arms, opening her eyes briefly to look up at me with that unfocused gaze of the very young. In her eyes, I see the future, not just hers, but ours as a family. A future where every member is valued, where age brings respect rather than dismissal, where love is demonstrated through action rather than just words. Welcome to the family, little one, I whisper. You're going to love it here. The end.